they assist with the inner vision. So when Greene is talking about, expanding our minds to the outer limits of our potential and being able to see the secret core of life itself, I honestly think that this could actually be a nod to the preserving and raising of the sacred secretion, or the activating of the 144,000 light body, because it seems so, in the way that it's written, and how compelling it is. I feel like he has had this experience for himself to be able to write about it in such a distinct way. Shall we take it away?
Yes, we shall take it away.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and all of that stuff. I am Kelly Marie Kerr, and this is
MLAP, how are you?
Today we're going to be reviewing the book Mastery by Robert Greene. So some of you may hold this author in a controversial light due to his earlier titles, The Strategies of War, for example, and the notorious 48 Laws of Power, which contain quite manipulative and indecent strategies that challenge the karmic and moralistic and spiritual laws. However, for the most part, this later book, Mastery, has a totally different tone, making us wonder whether or not Robert Greene had experienced his own spiritual awakening of sorts. And then that would have maybe led him to write this slightly more spiritually aware book, because it does have a much more balanced and spiritually conducive approach to self-development than those other previous titles. So perhaps he had some kind of pang of conscience, that little Jiminy Cricket in his ear. I'd be interested to know more about that, but I did try to find some interviews where he was speaking on that kind of thing, but unfortunately I couldn't find anything. So if anybody knows whether Robert Greene had some kind of inward transformation, please do mention it in the comments, because that'd be really interesting to know. But yes, Mastery, this book, I've got the concise version here, which is also very good, but the longer version is also available. Mastery is holistic in its approach and gives a lot of generous spiritual insight by relating its lessons to the true life stories, which have been very well researched. And he goes into a lot of depth in these case studies of so-called masterminds like Leonardo da Vinci. Each chapter begins with the story of an iconic historical figure who exemplifies the chapter's overall concept. Then comes several concrete ideas on how to apply this knowledge to your own circumstances, inspiring you to follow in the footsteps of these masters, showing how their power is eminently attainable. And so Greene says, and at the root of power is a simple process that leads to mastery, one that is accessible to all of us. And this quote really does kind of sum up exactly what the book aims to get to the crux of. What is this simple process available to us exactly?
The book has 389 pages and includes information about the higher intelligence, divine mind, the definition of attainment of self-mastery through harnessing our inner power or force, as Greene refers to it, finding your purpose, niche, avoiding the false path, and letting go of useless conditions and programming. And the traits of many great masters are explored to give further context to how our own physical, emotional, and spiritual development. Overall, this book is a fantastic exploration of some of the keys that can come together to enrich our life journeys from self realization all the way through to the practical application and honing of our individual gifts, personalities, and talents. Lots of traditional qualities are discussed, such as humility, apprenticeship, honesty, and seeking to give or contribute to humanity on the whole.
Now, of course, these themes do tie in with the universal teachings of karma, compassion, and bhakti, which also can draw back to the sacred secretion and the disposition that we're in order to preserve and raise the sacred secretion. And it also draws back to the retention of creative essences or sexual fluids, and that how that ties into our personal power and the development of that. And these are all things which we're going to explore in this episode. So let's go to our first quote. You possess an inner force that seeks to guide you towards your life's task, what you are meant to accomplish in the time that you have to live. The first move toward mastery is always inward, learning who you really are and reconnecting with that innate force. Knowing it with clarity, you will find your way to the proper career path and everything else will fall into place. It is never too late to start this process. So just jumping straight off the back of that quote and our introduction there, I think that the inward force is, kind of spoken of in many other ways throughout lots of different texts. And I think that the way that Robert Greene is using it here in terms of like how we develop ourselves into, what he's calling mastery is really interesting. And for myself, I feel that I see the inner force as that kind of innate knowingness, that still small voice of God that, leads you to the kind of straight and narrow way where everything seems really effortless. And then that life's task or purpose is more like the divine appointments and synchronicities that spring up when we're in that alignment.
For me, lining up with that, definitely, I like the part where it says that you are meant to accomplish, and then the part where it says, in the time that you have to live. So I always think of that, just a sidebar is like the time. Like there's more so timers, right, on our DNA. We count up, we count the years, but technically it's a countdown, right? So essentially, there's amount of time you talk about telomeres and on the in our DNA and stuff like that, as far as how they keep reproducing, but that's what that makes me think about, that you have a certain amount of time here and what you do with that, if you take on a life task or a purpose, what you are, your inclinations, which I know he'll use that word later on, it lines up, like you're saying, those synchronicities and everything will start to fall in place. But the more you're aware or in tune with that innate force, the more I guess you could be efficient, in your path, as far as choosing it, not wasting time, and maybe less conflict, with yourself and with life. The more you're in tune with your own inner force.
Yeah, because time really is the golden commodity, I think. Like, we can gather all of these assets and material wealth, but once our time, in this lifetime, or this like reality or incarnation that we're in, however people like to see it, when that specific amount of time is up, then what's the point of the other things? So I guess that like ties in with the riches of heaven as well. And I love that you mentioned telomeres. Something reminded me of that the other day, and yeah, like the timers on our DNA, and how once that those telomeres have completely disappeared or deteriorated, we begin to, the messages can't get through our DNA, and our body stops building itself. That's so interesting. But then there are so many things that we can do to help the telomerase to kind of converse, as it were, with the telomeres and keep rejuvenating them. So then, is our time specific? I know, some people will say that, the day we die is already written ever since, before we were born. But other people will say, well, no, like it's not written. So I don't know even where I stand on that. I like to believe that, we are the creators of our own path, and that if we make good choices, our time will be prolonged. But perhaps if, we don't make such wise or healthy, even, or choices that to honor ourselves and others, then maybe our time will be lessened.
There's the God view, right? Looking down, you can see how both perspectives can be taken, right? Because it's like the son of perdition, right? If you go into the text, that someone had to take that position. Almost, that's kind of how it's written. Like there was a role for someone to play, and somebody was going to step into it. Whether it was Judas or some other person, someone had to play that role of the son of perdition. I've had conversations about archetypes and scripts and things that play out a certain way, so you just kind of step into it, or it's already laid out for you. But for me, I agree with you on the time. Obviously we can see how certain behaviors influence the time that we have here. I've seen both sides, like a person wrong place wrong time kind of thing, and those are the things that are more confusing to me. Like, the guy didn't do anything wrong. He went here, he just went to get a candy bar or whatever, and it turned into that. So I don't, those are the ones that get trickier for me, as opposed to like, you taking care of yourself, not excessively taking in too many vices. And but it's interesting. I like to feel that I can affect my time here.
And, if we do keep coming back here time and time again, then there really is all the time in the world.
No, that's dope. I've definitely experienced both. Me being a creative, and I work obviously in music. So I was just talking to one of my clients about deadlines, and that sense of urgency, a healthy sense of urgency, right? So I can see times where you put in your head, I have all the time in the world. Where does that take you creatively and as far as being productive? I like deadlines, like, all right, this has to get done. So that way I can parse out like what I need to do. So like, but I like to do like anything beats a zero. I don't like overloading myself with work. So like even today I spent time with my daughter. I had things to do, but I stopped what I was doing and we played basketball. And it meant to the world to her, and to me. I do like the sense of urgency to an extent, but knowing when you need to have that mentality, I think, to be able, the fluidity of mind, right? We're gonna get into, but That's
Yeah.
what that made me think about. So
Because in a manifestation realm, like I always think that if I'm fussing and worrying, I'm going to attract more of that energy and it's going to spiral. But if I get into the quiet confidence of, I know I'm going to get this done, and I'm feeling good about what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is authentic, which we're also going to get into later, then, it's much easier, I think, to be productive. When our work is aligned with our values, again, I think it does make our jobs much more easy. Our integrity doesn't suffer because, we're fully aligned, fully committed, fully passionate about what we're getting done and what we're sharing with the world, and the karma that's the ripples that it's sending out into the cosmos, and the effect that it's going to have on the individual consciousness, the creative consciousness. And when we're really confident in that, I think it does help us to feel great about the time that we are spending. If we think about like spending money in the same way that we spend time, well, I wouldn't just go out and waste my money on, something useless. So why would I go out and spend my time on something useless, especially when in a way time is so much more precious than any kind of physical materiality.
I think it was Jim Rohn. I might be saying that wrong, but Jim Rohn, he said like, actually it might be Bob Proctor. I think I'm jumping motivational speakers, but he talked about, what you're willing to trade your life for, because that's what we're doing, So when you get into the work, a labor of love, like what you're doing, even Kelly, with what you're doing, it's personal and it's aligned with your core motivation. So like that's the vein to be in, that's being on the beam, your work, make your work personal and aligned with your core motivations. So I like breaking things down, right? So the make your work part. So make it that, but make it what? Personal and align with your core motivations. So you got to identify that. That's the turning inward, right? And that turning inward to your inner force, knowing thyself, right? But then it goes into the challenges and the suffering, which is something that I wanted to go into, of the desire to avoid challenges and suffering. So if you have a tendency, or you habitually try to avoid challenges and suffering, you could be doing yourself a disservice. Excuse me.
The suffering is so beneficial to molding the character and to being on the path, because I can remember, older like role models in my life telling me that certain things that I didn't enjoy were character building. And, not that I want to promote the fact that anybody should have to suffer too hard, but challenges and suffering do shape us. They do help us to find out what we actually don't want to see more of in our lives and in the lives of our loved ones. And it helps us to be more affirmative about what we want to expand and build more of that is good for ourselves and others. And I think we find a lot of our magic in our suffering. We find a lot of our strength in our suffering. And I think when the God in us, when that divine light is really burning bright in us, it doesn't matter, because we can't be dropped. We can't be broken, because that infinite source power, that God, it can't fizzle out. It can't, there's nothing that anyone can say or do. There's nothing that, can't be overcome. As it says in the Bible, there's nothing you can't do with me. So, yeah, I've definitely felt this, felt the benefits of challenges and suffering for myself.
Yeah, I coming from the perspective of coaching, right, and even mastery of anything, right? A coach, a great coach is going to do what? They're going to challenge you and they're going to put you through some form of suffering, which is going to build a certain level of character or mettle, to where you can rise up to these challenges, and if they're great at it, they can provide you with the certain knowledge and insight, but also the experience that's going to lead to those character traits that you need to be a master at something, or to perform at an elite level. So it's interesting, and it made me think about it, and I was like, dang, like I need to potentially simulate certain challenges and suffering for myself, like with that awareness, as opposed to unconsciously or not doing something which leads to unnecessary challenges or unnecessary suffering. So that opened my mind,
Mm,
to a whole world of like what types of challenges and suffering can enter into my life, to being able to pick and choose, being in a nice, fluffy, beautiful environment. I don't know how much of my character that's going to build up. I don't
yeah.
know. Everything's great. So maybe I'm just chilling, kicking my feet up, but because things are challenging, like I'm willing to work hard. I'm willing to collaborate and communicate, and I'm more organized when I'm challenged, so bringing out those things in your character, um, it challenges and suffering, they do that oftentimes. So
And I think you can draw it into any of the chakra energies as well. When I was talking before, I could feel like a little pang in my heart. And, you could say that like loss and grief are things that, are challenges and we do suffer in a way. But out of that comes so much empathy, so much understanding, such a depth of appreciation for life itself. Um, and then, when we think about the baser, like root chakras in terms of security, and, our foundation, if we've been challenged or had suffering in terms of maybe instability, um, or not really feeling supported, whether that be financially or just like in our very close home environment. Um, what can come is like a realization that you want to create and build something better than what you've experienced. So the underdog is always kind of evolving and being scrappy, or has that just innate desire to become the top dog, right?
yeah, I agree. It's just it brings something out of you. Like, it can go the other way, right? And we talked about that. There's a lot of quotes and videos out there about the environment, right? It doesn't make you, it's like it's all based on you, so growing up in an environment that had a lot of pressures and you didn't have much, that could, again, the what is it, I think it's an African proverb about almost like the lack of is the mother, a lack of resources is the mother of like creativity, or I probably mauled that, but essentially, like when you don't have much, the imagination churns, and then you could start creating and coming up with ways of making things happen when you don't have much, um, to work with. So a great quote about the importance of passion and emotional connection in work comes on page 205 when Greene says, your emotional commitment to what you are doing will be translated directly into your work. If you go at your work with half a heart, it will show in the lackluster results and in the laggard way in which you reach the end. If you are doing something primarily for money, And without a real emotional commitment, it will translate into something that lacks a soul and that has no connection to you. You may not see this, but you can be sure that the public will feel it and that they will receive your work in the same lackluster spirit it was created in. If you are excited and obsessive in the hunt, it will show in the details. That is all right. I know we're going to discuss, but there was a director that I worked with, and he had a quote on his wall that's been driving him to excellence, right? And I don't know the origins. I don't even think it said it on the board, but it said, the quality of work that you put out is a direct reflection of your attitude towards yourself.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. And I can see in our notes here, we've got, by their fruits ye shall know them. And I feel like, in a way, those two quotes basically have the same essence. We are the trees. If our roots are grounded in passion for what we're doing, if we feel genuinely connected to what we're doing, then the fruits of our labors will be a total reflection of that. But if we are in this disposition of, discontent, and where our integrity is being challenged, and we're just feeling a lot of disgust for ourselves and what we're doing, then the fruit of our labor, is this mess, really.
Me creating music, I can tell where I'm at within myself, and sometimes I have to walk away. I'm not gonna force it. I'll come back. You know what I mean? And I usually make a lot of music based on mood and how I'm feeling. And sometimes it's just practice getting the reps in. Maybe it's like that with writing. There's some times where things are writing themselves. You're just kind of. Then there's other times to where it's like I'm not feeling it, but I'm gonna push through just because I said I'm gonna write a page tonight. So there's those moments, to where you kind of keep just grinding away, and and you get there. So that's a different muscle, I think, that you're exercising when you have those times. But the example of what you're doing may not line up with what it is that you want to do, but you can still do that with passion and good energy. Like you said, I had a conversation with my son that lines up with what you're saying too. um, I ended up getting an advertisement, an ad, for a song that, or an album. One of the artists I work with, they promoted his album at Times Square, right? And I didn't have a direct desire to get an ad at Times Square. Just having good energy can lead to a lot of unforeseen things, and I think the opposite, having bad energy, can lead to a lot of unforeseen things. And I think having the awareness, you can step out of it. Sidebar, my son, the conversation with him, he plays, I think, I don't know if it's Roblox or something. And in there, you can have different jobs and do different things. So the characters were getting paid a certain amount of money. So let's say a mechanic, right? But then when he does his research in real life, a mechanic may not make as much money as he thought. So he no longer wants to be a mechanic. So he asked me, he's like, Dad, like, I don't like kind of thinking like this. And I'm like, you know what? And he's like, well, in the game, I was a mechanic and I got paid this much money. But in real life, when I did the research, it's like this much money. So now I kind of don't want to do it. Am I wrong for that? So I was like, great. I love that you're thinking in this direction. So I just explained to him, like, it's kind of three things you want to do. You want your work to have an impact, you want it to line up with you, and of course, you want to be compensated, in a way that can further allow you to live the life you want to live. So So that was a conversation, and I saw him light up because I get what he was saying, but I was like, at the same time, you may not be able to check all three of those. You may not be making an impact, a great impact with the position, or you're not getting compensated as much, but you are making an impact and you are doing what you love to do, you know. So
Mhm.
might have to get that bag somewhere else.
Again, like you said earlier, it's a trade-off, isn't it? You might not be raking in dollars or pounds hand over fist, but if you have like a really strong contentment, um, then you will feel the fruits and see the fruits in that person's lives in other ways, no doubt about it. I think when I was before I started Seek Vision, and I was writing and doing some acting work, I used to really struggle with going up for roles, or my agent wanting to send me for roles that I didn't really want. In my heart of hearts, I remember specifically, I won't say the title, but there was this one film that was a horror film, and to this day, I still don't feel great about the fact that, I was involved with something that really did not sit well with my soul. Um, there was a lot of discomfort and a lot of like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this though? And the kind of justification back then was, yeah, but if I could just compromise myself for a little while, then eventually I'll be able to have control, and I won't have to take these things that to me aren't helping the world to come to a better place. And I fully believe that that is why my career didn't take off, because there was just so many sticking points within me, and the passion wasn't there. Like Greene is saying, the emotional commitment to those tasks wasn't there. There was just so much like juxtaposition between the inner and the outer, and I basically, what was happening is, on a really deep soul level, I didn't really want it, even though I thought I did at the time. And so the lackluster spirit that these things were created in, as he said, showed that I actually wasn't committed to the people that I was working for. And I feel sorry for them, because I'm sure there was somebody else who would have loved to have come in and done that role with way more commitment and gusto. But now, with the work that I do, I am obsessive in the hunt, and it does resonate with my genetics, the fabric of my being. I'm not saying that there's any right or wrong in what we pursue. What was right for one person might not be right for another, but for me personally, I finally got to that point where I was like, oh yay, this feels excellent, this is me, this is it, woohoo. And then the task of life was shown, and it all feels very organic. And I'd love to share that, and hope that that will inspire others to find what feels organic for them also.
Yeah. Ah, man. Yeah, that I relate to the what we tell ourselves, and that the self-hypnosis, man. If you got to take control of that, right? Auto suggestion, whatever you you want to call it. It's just, that sometimes I've heard it, man. I hear people, I don't know if it's my personality or what, but people they want to vent. They want to tell me really what's going on, and I hear it, and I could hear them trying to sell it to themselves to continue. Sometimes you hit that point to where it's like, you know what, I got to try something else, and this isn't resonating with me. Um, it's not worth the money because I've talked about compensation a lot, and that's something that I've thought about. And sometimes you could, if you can establish that from the beginning, And I'm big when it comes to business, any kind of ventures. Like you have to lay that stuff out in the beginning, even if you're doing business with friends, family, colleagues. It's okay to talk about compensation and expectation. A lot of people have aversions to doing that. The next thing you know, you find yourself in a tricky situation.
Okay, so we are kind of changing the subject a little bit here with our next quote. So Greene says, for 3 million years, we were hunter-gatherers, and it was through the evolutionary pressures of that way of life that a brain so adaptable and creative eventually emerged. Today, we stand with the brains of hunter-gatherers in our heads.
I think there's always a rising and a falling of consciousness, a rising and a falling of everything. So some of the groups, they were up there, but if you want to start from the hunter gatherer or post that period, then yeah, there what we have evolved from that point. But if you go back again, there was a fall in consciousness, so I that's kind of what I take. I just think he started, if you start with certain histories of different people, it may sound bad, but there was a history before that time to where certain groups of people were winning, so keep going back, and you can see that, so that's how I reconcile this position.
And again, I think that brings us back to this idea of time and its cyclical nature of, these spirals or waves of ups and downs. If we think about the Sumerians and the Atlanteans at being at the top, and then, these hunter-gatherers that Greene's talking about at being like, at the lower point of the next cycle, and then gradually coming back up, and perhaps those cycles are unavoidable. I was watching Back to the Future recently, and I took a lot from that trilogy this time around that I'd never considered before, especially in terms of the cycles and how, in a way, like, we can keep going back over things until we transcend them, until we find a way out of that loop.
I'm going to move on to the quotes from page 42 and 44. The word vocation comes from the Latin meaning to call or to be called. Its use in relation to work began in early Christianity. Certain people were called to a life in the church. That was their vocation. They could recognize this literally by hearing a voice from God who had chosen them for this profession. Over time, the word became secularized, referring to any work or study that a person felt was suited to his or her interests, particularly a manual craft. It is time, however, that we return to the original meaning of the word, for it comes much closer to the idea of a life's task and mastery. The voice in this case that is calling you is not necessarily coming from God, but from deep within. It emanates from your individuality. It tells you which activities suit your character, and at a certain point, it calls you to a particular form of work or career. Your work, then, is something connected deeply to who you are, not a separate compartment in your life. You develop then a sense of your vocation. Your vocation is more than the work that you do. It is intimately connected to the deepest part of your being and is a manifestation of the intense diversity in nature and within human culture. In this sense, you must see your vocation as eminently poetic and inspiring. You are born with a particular makeup and tendencies that mark you as a piece of fate. It is who you are to the core. Some people never become who they are. They stop trusting in themselves. They conform to the tastes of others, and they end up wearing a mask that hides their true nature. If you allow yourself to learn who you really are by paying attention to that voice and force within you, then you can become what you were fated to become, an individual, a master. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, yeah, okay, let's go back to the beginning of that. So the word vocation comes from the Latin meaning to call or to be called. I mean, that's fantastic, isn't it? I think when we find our calling, yes, we find our vocation. It says that people who felt called to the church, for example, recognized the calling as a voice from God. And then over time, the word became secularized. So it didn't have to be that you were called to work in a church. It could just be to, whatever job or craft or subject we end up, working with in our lives. And then he goes on to say that the voice isn't necessarily coming from God, but from deep within. Well, I mean, we know that God is out, in, through literally every, particle of light in every atom by this point. So, it's not really a case of location of God. But I think the point that he's trying to make is that it emanates from our individuality. So it is like a sense of destiny. Then, he goes on to say that once we're connected to that, to the most deepest part of our being, then we become, inspired. So, I mean, I agree with all of this, what he's saying here. I really do think that, our genetic makeup, and also not only our genetic makeup, so our nature, but our nurture as well, the environment and the situation and the experience that we have along the way really shapes us into that kind of final fruit of what we're going to be and do and the ripples that we're going to create in life. But unfortunately he then goes on to point out the fact that let me just read this part again. You are born with a particular makeup and tendencies that mark you as a piece of fate. It is who you are at the core. But some people never become who they are because they stop trusting in themselves. They conform to the tastes of others and they end up wearing a mask that hides their true nature. I think we've probably all felt at some point in our lives the pressure to conform. And I do agree with Robert Greene in this way that unfortunately at times those pressures, if we give in to them, can take us away from finding out who we are at our core and having that core essence blossom in the way that it was designed to.
That was heavy. That was a lot. So I'll bring it home with this thought. Who you are, what you are. So your calling is in yourself. You you said that it emanates from you. That's I love that because the people around you, and it's in pretty much all the Disney movies, all the Pixar movies. There's parents or overseers who are like, you got to do this, you got to sing, you got Happy Feet, you got Moana, you got all these people who are like, this is the way you go. And then they have to come to terms within themselves and go on this other journey. And then eventually the family or the people around them, they come around, you know, and they're like, oh, I knew it all along, or whatever the case is. But it brought me to a place of they may mean well and they think they know you. So then they try to give you a life path or a vocation or this is where you should go in life based on them thinking they know you. So they're the false self they're giving you and the false path that they're giving you is not right, you know, for you, maybe, you know, or they may get it right. I don't know. But for the most part, whatever it is that you do is going to line up with who you are, what you are. So I just saw the connection of people trying to give that to you because they're like looking in you like, oh, you'd be great for this, or you should do this, or you know, like I love nursing, like you should be a nurse, like you know, it's not too much schooling, you'll make a lot of money. They're selling it to you, but it's like, man, like I don't feel called to that, you know, and I don't doubt that it can be rewarding. I don't doubt that I can make money, but that's not how I want to spend my time, you know,
Mhm.
and sometimes you could be explicit, you know, and other times, you know, you may not be able to just bring that to them like that, you know. "Yeah, okay, thanks, you know, I'll consider it, you know, and you go on with your day. But that really made me think about that. Just other people trying to tell you what you should do or trying to offer you paths
Mm.
or vocations based on what they see in you or think they see or know about you, you know. But it's going to be you who are going to know yourself, and in that you're going to find out whatever your life task is or your calling or vocation or destiny. It's all within yourself.
Well said. Absolutely awesome. And the rishis, the Kundalini rishis, talk about, you know, how the retention of creative seeds, so semen retention or sexual essence, saving, um, if you like, actually gives us a much stronger sense of self and of direction, because they explain it as, you know, we come from this, each one of us comes from this one creative seed, this one spermatoza, you know, with whatever chromosomes that were in our makeup at that time. And then our body goes on to make more and more creative seeds throughout our lives. And so those creative seeds within us, when they're not expelled, what they do is they actually become food for the brain and the body and for our being. They actually feed that one cell from whence we came. So it actually leads to a much more expanded understanding of what our driving force was at the time. You know, it's the only real source of nutrition that that original seed can get from the body is of its own likeness. You know, in the God design and in the cell of life, we talk about things like phosphorus and lecithin in the body and how that helps to build up the creative cells and to feed the light within us. And that creative, there's a reason, you know, why these things have been given these names, like procreative essences or creative essences, because that is the seed from whence we came. And, you know, in that microscopic seed is this tree that we have turned into, with its good and bad fruits and blossoms of what we become. So when we retain that sap, it actually feeds our intelligence and our emotional bodies, and our light bodies, to the point where we're sharpened in our clarity, and we have a much stronger driving force. And, you know, this is why professional footballers and athletes and you know, dancers and other, you know, professional people, even like, you know, myself, I have, well, since I learned about this knowledge and applied it to life, I have 100% noticed how you know, my creativity can come in ebbs and flows, and how and why, you know, people like Bob Proctor talk about saving the sexual essence and the benefits that created within us. Because to me, like, you know, when I think about that stem root, that particle from where we've come from, that is in a way our spirit, our individual spirit, in connection to, you know, the entire kind of non-individualized spirit, if you like. So our individualized spirit needs all the nourishment that it can get, and that's where it comes from, all of that, those amazing, like, powerful chemicals that create lives, you know, outside lives in terms of like children, or chi, children within our body, our thoughts, our cells, and all of those things. And I also believe that the social pressures of conforming become less when we feel very strong in who we are. We still experience the same pressures, but because we are so empowered in the knowledge of who we are and what we represent and what we stand for and don't stand for, there's not such a willingness to bow down and to like give up and say, oh, okay, well, I'll just compromise myself here and there, because that sharpened spirit is like, hell no, I'm not going there. Like, you gotta be kidding me. That's a waste of my time. I am not spending my time doing that. Like, I know where I need to be spending my time, and it all becomes a lot clearer.
It depends on potentially who you're coming together with. That's the best way I describe it. And I think if the energies are aligned in a certain way, instead of the energy going down or out, they can go inward and upward potentially. Now, I've experienced that, and to where it was more of a multiplying of the energies as opposed to just doing away with it, you
Yeah.
know. And so also when it comes to manifesting too, because again, it's the same idea of reproduction, right? So you're taking something from the mental plane and reproducing it on the physical plane. So when the two energies, the batteries come together and create the circuit, some interesting things can manifest or take place if it's done in the right way. So I just think it's interesting how the creation works. And but I do see the upside, and I have experienced the sharpness, and I'm aware of, you know, people holding out just to be sharp, locked in on whatever it is they want to accomplish. But I think there's another door that's available, you know, potentially. So
I think when we're with a partner, Well, this is what the studies show, this is like, white tantra and all of those sorts of things, twin flame yoga. It describes that, when you're with a partner and you are in a very mutual union and place of like love and appreciation, that's one thing. But that is what I would probably call making love, but then at the other end of the more intimate realms, we have what the Bible would probably call debauchery, Sodom and Gomorrah and all of those sorts of things, which obviously bring other images to mind, not two people very much in love, enjoying and sharing those feelings of passion and intimacy, but something much more urgent and aggressive and almost like it can become an addiction. And so the studies show that when people become addicted to just releasing those essences, like, every day or more than that even, that's when, people become very vulnerable to all kinds of brain related diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's and all of those kind of things. And there are many peer-reviewed studies that show that over indulgence and addiction to that can deteriorate the brain cells very quickly. And because we also have brain cells in our hearts, we also have brain cells in our mesenteric center. We're not just talking about our head deteriorating, we're talking about a deterioration throughout. So again, like, I guess ideally it is about balance. And that is probably why we find these ideas of cycles in the Bible where, we're only retaining for this specific period of time when we know that the essences are in the lower chakras. And then, okay, after that, it's, okay.
It's interesting. I've been on, a lot of sides of that energy, in terms of experience. And so I just thought that was something to say, and in terms of the seed retention for those who are on that path. So being in a good space with who you're with, it doesn't have to go down. You can go up, with the energy. So don't beat yourself up.
100%.
So but yeah, so go on a journey. It's super dope. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
And I think, it's also worth mentioning the fact that it really is important for the energy to go up more than it goes down for all of us. And, when we talk about conformity and pressure, oh my goodness, everything that we see in, the commercial world, in the music video world, fashion, all of these different things, like they immediately draw our energy down into those bottom chakras where we feel aroused or we feel attracted to something or someone because of the way that those things are being portrayed in the media. So then there's this danger of the collective consciousness having their experience of life from those lower chakras, where everything is about sensuality and that kind of indulgence and enjoyment, whereas if there were more things that were geared towards attracting our higher senses and the energies of those higher chakras, if we saw more of that in the mainstream media, then that there would be a much more balanced overall collective consciousness, no doubt. And I do sometimes wonder whether it is deliberately geared that way to keep the consciousness down.
Man, yeah, it definitely seems like that. But again, if that's true, then again, why? And I've heard a lot of stories and theories as to why. Like if there's just in a malicious group, or if it's like, no, it's just greed. We already have inclinations in that way, or it's already set up that way, so why change it? You know what I mean? It works, it's profitable, it keeps the economy booming, and you like it, don't you?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I do, but come on, man, mix it up a little bit. Like, not that it's bad, but like, just, be holistic, right? Deal with everything else too. So
Okay, let's talk a little more about the inner force and how it links with our intuition and knowingness. And the following is paraphrased from page 41. Many of the greatest masters in history have confessed to experiencing some kind of force or voice or sense of destiny that has guided them forwards. For Napoleon Bonaparte, it was a star that he always felt in ascendance when he made the right move. For Socrates, it was his demon, an inner voice that told him what to avoid. Albert Einstein talked of an inner voice that shaped the direction of his views. Such feelings can be seen as purely mystical or as hallucinations and delusions, but there is another way to see them, as eminently real, practical, and explicable. It can be explained in the following way. All of us are born unique. This uniqueness is marked genetically in our DNA. We are a one-time phenomenon in the universe. Our exact genetic makeup has never occurred before, nor will it ever be repeated. For all of us, this uniqueness first expresses itself in childhood through certain primal inclinations. For Leonardo da Vinci, it was exploring the natural world around his village and bringing it to life on paper in his own way. For others, it can be another inclination, perhaps to mathematics or sports. These inclinations are forces within us that come from a deeper place than conscious words can express. They draw us towards certain experiences and away from others. This primal uniqueness naturally wants to assert and express itself, but some experience it more strongly than others. In those who become masters, the force is so strong that it feels like something that has its own external reality, a force, a voice, destiny. We are literally inspired, the Latin word meaning something from the outside breathing within us. At your birth, a seed is planted. That seed is your uniqueness. It wants to grow, transform itself, and flower to its full potential. It has a natural, assertive energy to it. Your life's task is to bring that seed to flower, to express your uniqueness through your work. What weakens this force is the degree to which you have succumbed to another force in life, conformity. This counterforce can be very powerful. If these counterforces become strong enough, you can lose complete contact with your uniqueness, with who you really are. Your inclinations and desire become modeled on those of others. This can set you off on a very dangerous path. You end up choosing a career that does not really suit you. Your desire and interests slowly wane, and your work suffers for it. At moments when you make At moments when you must make important decisions, you flounder or follow what others are doing because you have no sense of inner direction or radar to guide you. You have broken contact with your destiny as formed at birth. You must avoid such a fate. The process of following your life's task all the way to mastery can essentially begin at any point in life. The hidden force within you is always there and ready to be engaged.
So that leads into that idea of being able, it's not too late, right? So we may have these paradigms, right? We may have this false path, right? Which we can go into in the false self, but it's not too late to go back into this childlike spirit of being born again, of stepping into a new self, really diving deep within, and really connecting with that inner force, that true voice, your true calling. And again, I'm not starting to sound preachy, almost sounds like, but just you can do it. You can go into it. You know, there might be a dichotomy of what's going on. You got one foot in what you want to do, one foot in just paying the bills and some, job or something. But um, if you really want to change your experience, right, whether it's an illusion or not, you can change it, but you got to go inward to find out how, and to really do the work. It's an inside job. And that's what all of this makes me think about. Everything you read, and what the book seems to be pointing towards is to go within. That's where everything is, which in the spiritual community we know that it's all about returning and going within and digging deep and finding out what you need. It's all inside of you. um, but this ability to go back to kind of a childlike spirit, and mental state to change the course of your life, I think is really cool, and it relates to, the making it into heaven, having a childlike spirit, being born again, and reincarnation and stuff like that. So I think it's in the same vein, essentially.
Mm.
So it's not too late.
I think it's kind of nice that he puts it in very strong language, like you must avoid this fate. Like, there's an urgency because time is such a commodity. Um, Fantastic. And when you said about, it's never too late. It really isn't. And, sometimes we actually probably go more like this than like this, even if we find that path. Sometimes we might just take a meander off for a bit and then go, oh, I'm not on my path. And, we do whatever practice works for us to come back to our alignment, and we'll probably be in it for a while. And then, oh, what am I doing over here? So it is like a continual journey of authenticity and staying in those good juicy feelings of what our inclinations are. What are our true inclinations? We don't need to pretend to do or be anyone else, or have inclinations that don't truly resonate with us. Why would we do that to ourselves? Like, we are free to be who we are. And I love that it talked about there only being one of each of us. And, that exact combination of DNA will never come around again. Like, wow, how perfect.
No, I love that. I mean, the inclinations are a big deal for me, because a lot of the inclinations that I had from such a young age, they don't make sense in the sense of my experiences. So that's what brings me back to this place of like reverence for individuality. Like there's something unique about you, and you know, different things could factor in. I know, I think with astrology goes into a lot of that in terms of what was going on when you came through, maybe something that you did before you came here. But whatever the backstory is to your inclinations, most of those inclinations are tied to you, and they're there, and they don't, from what I've seen, just come from your the family you're connected to, or the environment you grew up in, and I know, and I'm like, dude, not what's wrong with me, but I'm like, dude, like, where's my circle? Like, where's, what's going on, man? Because my inclinations were different than, the people around me to my left and my right. And, but I'm starting to run into people with somewhat similar, inclinations and values and interests. And it's pretty cool, but it's definitely pointing me down this path of what I'm doing now. So, honoring those, being in tune with your inclinations is like the true north.
Okay, so we just have a couple more quotes for you guys that we'll explore. So the next one says, all of us have access to a higher form of intelligence, one that can allow us to see more of the world, to anticipate trends, to respond with high speed and accuracy to any circumstance. The intelligence is cultivated by deeply immersing ourselves in a field of study and staying true to our inclinations, no matter how unconventional our approach might seem to others. When we fuse this intuitive feeling with rational processes, we expand our minds to the outer limits of our potential and are able to see into the secret core of life itself. We then come to have powers that approximate the instinctive force and speed of animals, but with the added reach that our human consciousness brings us. This power is what our brains were designed to attain. And we will be naturally led to this type of intelligence if we follow our inclinations to their ultimate end. So that's from page 281, and I just absolutely love it. It speaks so much volume to me. I think, the higher form of intelligence is the superconscious mind or the Christ mind, to be able to, have that speed of accuracy and response is to do with like our cognition building, and our mind expanding. And I like what he says about the fusion of the intuitive mind with the rational mind. And yeah, I do honestly agree with the point he makes about like, this is what we were designed to attain. Because I've had a little glimpse of this for myself, and about, having moments of that expansion of mind where you actually do start to see the core of life itself. And it's so beautiful and limitless and incredible that, everything else suddenly becomes pale in comparison. And then we automatically like resonate in this place of like bliss and appreciation. And then because we're in Eden consciousness, that is where everything blossoms. So I think for me, that is the ultimate, the goal of, setting ourselves free, and setting others free so that we can be free indeed, by the way, the truth and the light. So
I was hung up on the inclinations.
oh yeah.
The following our inclinations to their ultimate ends. Like, that was, everything else is great, but sometimes we want or need direction, right? Like, who should we listen to? What should we follow? So having our inclinations be our guide, that I want to really emphasize that.
Mm. Well, I think
And
our inclinations, are fueled by our intuitive mind. And research shows that real core part of us, our intuition, stems from the heart. And again, that comes into feeling and compassion, and how that has a knock-on effect in the brain that is within the head. So I think, when we talk about that fusion of the heart and the brain, that cohesion or synergy, 1+1 = 1,000 suddenly, just because of that connection. It's like, yes, wow, of course, that is where we should aim, I believe.
Yeah, big time. I see it as a parent, you know, the childlike intuition and, being guided by the rational mind and stuff like that. So oftentimes I'm definitely tuned into that idea of, like you said, childlike imagination, and you're able to come up with a lot of stuff and think in ways that you normally wouldn't. And then that's when you invite in the rational mind to come in with a theory and to shape that wonderful out of the box idea. So yeah, definitely people say follow your heart, follow your bliss. Now we got to follow our inclinations. So
Mm.
um, I think that's pretty cool. So that inclination thing is really resonating with me. So
And Einstein said it as the rational mind is a faithful servant to the sacred gift, which is, so the sacred gift is the intuitive mind, that authentic core part of us that has its inbuilt programmed inclinations, and then the rational mind is the part that's weighing everything up. And again, this comes into chemistry and how, when the heart starts to swell because it's feeling happy and supported and blissful, we get those oxytocin and vasopressins, and the anandamide, so the bliss molecule, which, are a catalyst, as we've said many times, for the pineal metabolism, which is the upgrades of melatonin and into DMT and all those other wonderful chemicals that literally flood our bodies with so much wholeness, so much light, so much promise. And the good design explains how these chemicals are what's responsible for our expanded consciousness. So, because luciferin, for example, and DMT they assist with the inner vision. So when Greene is talking about, expanding our minds to the outer limits of our potential and being able to see the secret core of life itself, I honestly think that this could actually be a nod to the preserving and raising of the sacred secretion, or the activating of the 144,000 light body, because it seems so, in the way that it's written, and how compelling it is. I feel like he has had this experience for himself to be able to write about it in such a distinct way.
yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like a nod, to that, but yeah, to put the words, the core, it made me think again about, he talked about the core of yourself, so the core of life, the core of yourself. So just getting to that place, it seems to be, more so a matter of you going through yourself to get to that place.
Mm.
So going through you to get to the core of life, there's a direct connection. And once you get there, you'll clearly see it. And to me, then it becomes a matter of staying in that space. Sometimes we forget, then we go outside of ourselves, and then we're wrestling with life and other things. But it's like, get back to that place, and then you could operate from there. So that going to and fro is kind of a thing on this walk, which I'm sure you all know. Sometimes you forget, and then it's like something in life happens, and then it's like, oh shoot, let me go back, and operate from within and start manifesting again and knowing where I need to go, what decisions to make, following intuition, bringing in reason when you need it, and applying it where it needs to be applied. Um, so that's really cool, but they have value. So both, you know.
I feel like whatever I'm reading, whoever the author is, male, female, whether the book is, uh, by an American or an Indian or an Australian or whatever, like the same idea always runs through, like this fusing of something very primal, something so instinctive, like it is literally our program. And when we go against it, we have visceral feelings that, something's wrong. Merging that with something very rational and practical it's always a key. It's always mentioned, that, that heart mind synergy or heart brain harmonizing. It's 100% a key. And I get asked all the time, about, so what do I do when the moon is in my sun sign? And aside from, detoxing and all of those things, it really is about finding that resonance, finding that truth, being able to sit in, what do I know? I can remember on part of my like a journey of awakening, I was like, oh, but I don't know what I should do about this, and I don't know what that is, and I don't understand this, and da da da, and confusions about Bible passages and different things. But I can remember very vividly God saying over and over again, "What do you know, Kelly? But what do you know? Stop asking me about all these things. Like, but I don't know about this, but I don't know about this. What do you know?" And I can remember sitting down and writing a list of like, okay, what do I know? What do I know for sure? And that list is actually quite short. And then that's like a springboard for that synergy, I believe, to start happening. And then because it's happening within, it automatically flows to the without and vice versa.
Right. Dang. Yeah. Know, right? What do I know? So getting to a place of certainty within yourself. So I'm it made me think of the hero and the guide, right? In the stories, the hero on a mission, that's another book, sidebar. I've always talked about the hero, the victim, and the villain. But there's another character, which we play all of them in our own story, and we can play all of them except the hero in another person's story. So the guide, I'm asking, would the intuitive mind or the rational mind, who would be the hero and who would be the guide in the story?
Oof, that's a good question. For me, it would be the intuitive mind.
As the hero?
Yeah.
Okay.
As the guide. If
Okay.
I am ever struggling with a decision, I do something, a meditative practice called Heart Talk. I believe I originally found it via the Heart Math Institute, their exercises that they lay out in one of their books. I will try and find that and put it in the description below. So we can get very heady about things and be having all these rational thoughts and trying to weigh things up and have this whole dialogue and story going on about this like one decision that we're trying to make. But when we breathe into the heart and we bring the nitric oxide down into the heart space, and we just simply ask, what do you, to your heart, what do you feel about this? Almost like as if you're imagining your higher self. the heart speaks in very short little nuggets. You know, like for me, whenever I hear that voice of God, it's like, it's stuff like, what do you know, Kelly? Or like, seek vision. And, you know, it's very short, but very poignant and full of truth. So for me, the guide is that short, sweet, to the point. You know, sometimes it might be like a catchphrase or like a bit of a riddle, and it's a doesn't even make any sense. But to me, that is the truest voice. And when when we resonate in that truth, our rational mind has something very, very powerful to work with.
Right? Because again, in the story, the hero is pretty much saving himself. Like he wants to be victorious. It wants to be, the hero has, in the book is basically saying the hero has to be transformed in order to get to where he want to go. Right? So there's this process of transformation. So thinking about the rational mind being transformed and attaining something, which could be this level of brain or mind that he's talking about. We can get there, right? But with the help of the guide being the intuitive mind or intuition. So that, for you to take that position on that, that's cool. I mean, I don't know why the thought popped up to ask that question of who would be the hero and who would be the guide, because I can see it kind of being flipped too, but
Yeah.
that one hit a little more home, of you know how that works. So that was cool. So thank you for that. I would go with what you said because I was like, man, the intuitive mind is the hero. Like, like the intuitive mind is what's gonna save the day. You know what I mean? But I can see how the rational mind can be a guide of establishing boundaries, or like, you know, the rational mind is what's really learning like the limited universe of, you can't go this far. The intuitive mind is like, yes, you can. Like, you
Yeah.
can, but then it's like, no, like, so if the rational mind is more on the level of reality and the intuitive mind is more on the level of illusion, the illusory realm, I can kind of see that, how the rational mind could be the guide for the intuitive mind.
I
But it's two different
definitely
stories.
think that there's a coexist thing happening, that they both have strengths. Um, and you know, this might manifest differently for different people. I don't know. I can only speak of my own, how I experience it. But for me, yeah, like the head can be a lot of like blah, 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 like, you know, watching the politicians in the House of Commons go on and on all day. Whereas like the voice in here is like da 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 da, and everyone goes, oh,
Yeah.
it's like a mic drop kind of guy. Like I only need to say one line. Okay, so we're going to look at the subject of reversal now, and this will be our closing passage from the book Mastery by Robert Greene.
Reversal. The reversal to mastery is to deny its existence or its importance, and therefore the need to strive for it in any way. But such a reversal can only lead to feelings of powerlessness and disappointment. This reversal leads to enslavement to what we shall call the false self. Your false self is the accumulation of all the voices you have internalized from other people, parents, and friends who want you to conform to their ideas of what you should be like and what you should do, as well as societal pressures to adhere to certain values that can easily seduce you. It also includes the voice of your own ego, which constantly tries to protect you from unflattering truths. This self talks to you in a clear words, and when it comes to mastery, it says things like, mastery is for the geniuses, the exceptionally talented, the freaks of nature. I was simply not born that way. Or it says, mastery is ugly and immoral. It is for those who are ambitious and egotistical. Better to accept my lot in life and to work to help other people instead of enriching myself. Or it might say, success is all luck. Those we call masters are only people who were at the right place at the right time. I could easily be in their place if I had a lucky break. Or it might also say, to work for so long at something that requires so much pain and effort, why bother? Better to enjoy my short life and do what I can to get by. As you must know by now, these voices do not speak the truth. Mastery is not a question of genetics or luck, but of following your natural inclinations and the deep desire that stirs you from within. This desire within is this desire within you is not motivated by egotism or sheer ambition for power, both of which are emotions that get in the way of mastery. It is instead a deep expression of something natural, something that marked you at birth as unique. And following your inclinations and moving toward mastery, you make a great contribution to society, enriching it with discoveries and insights, and making the most of the diversity in nature and among human society. It is, in fact, the height of selfishness to merely consume what others create and to retreat into a shell of limited goals and immediate pleasures. Alienating yourself from your inclinations can only lead to pain and disappointment in the long run, and a sense that you have wasted something unique.
I thought this was a really nice topic to end on, because obviously we've talked so much about our inclinations and the inner force and you know, following our highest good, or you know, our what feels authentic and true to us. But unfortunately, I do think a lot of people get bogged down in this kind of reversal state of mind. You know, what he said there about, you know, our belief system can tell us that, you know, mastery is ugly and immoral, you know, egotistical or overly ambitious and all of these things. And, you know, but then Greene is saying that actually, you know, sheer ambition and egotism are emotions that get in the way of mastery. So I think it's really important to dissolve the stigma about, like, why is it not okay for us to want to develop the truth within us? You know, why do some people get stuck on that being selfish, or, you know, we're inclined then to something that's not in service to others? It's actually the opposite, isn't it? You know, by being true to ourselves, we end up in our highest form of service to everyone else. And I again, like, I thought it was like a nice idea for us to end on, and a nice discussion for us to end on, because he's saying that, as you know by now, these voices do not speak the truth. And I agree. And I think it's very important for us to not get bogged down in what a lot of people will tell us is, you know, not right for us, when actually it is.
Yeah, totally. That, geez, yeah, 100%. The false self, the false path, all of that. Excuse me, is it's a big deal. Like you said, some people are locked in this reversal, you know, and the voices, right? You know, the ego, whatever. It's like we didn't necessarily create that. You know, a lot of times it's just you grew up around it. You were overbearing parents, you know, siblings, you know, your school, whatever. You had a teacher tell you something crazy, and you live with that, you know. And coming out of that, you know, is it's a good thing to come out of. But what's going to spark that? You know, you think of the masters, the majority of them, if not all, actually had to go against the paradigm. You know, again, they went against, you know, maybe their environment. You know, it gave examples of, you know, Mozart and, you know, different people like that were trying to steer them in a different direction, you know, or they had issues in school, you know, but it was because of how they thought, you know, and where their inclinations were, you know, and they went on to do great things. So a lot of the things that we have and experience today came from people who got to this level of mastery, you know, by following their inclinations, you know, and again, seek vision, you know, you followed your inclinations, you know, and that's why, you know, we're here, and, you know, we have your, you know, your books, and, you know, you took the time to put in the efforts, and you were what, emotionally committed. So your work is not lackluster, you know, it's amazing, it's beautiful, and it's out here changing lives. So that to me, you know, just right here, just us right here, and those of you listening, again, you know, the contributions, you know, will be there, you know, once you step into, if you haven't already stepped into getting through your true self and your true path, you know, not a false self and a false path. So I think from what we covered, you can clearly see how you can end up on a false path with the false self, with the mask, just by being around these in these environments. So I think it's really cool to close out with this section as a reminder of the reversal. You know, we spent time showing you the path of mastery and the benefits and how to do it, but going to this point of really putting emphasis on the false self and a false path being something that you're attracted to, you know, for the wrong reason, could put you on a false path, you know, and that can come from, again, the false self, what you know, were told you were or believed you were.
Yeah, well said. And I think the great thing about this book is it does take time to give, you know, true case studies of, you know, these individual people who became masters, and it tells the tales of their adversities, whether they were adversities in the outer world that they were experiencing, or whether they were adversities that they were dealing with in terms of their own like thought constraints and programming and conditions. You know, like I know for myself that when I was writing the God design and making those first videos, my own conditioning was like, Kelly, who do you think you are to do this? And I was literally like so convicted, you know, so emotionally connected by that point that thankfully I was like, shut up. Like, I don't know who I think I am right now, but like, I know I've got to share this, like, because this meant something very special to me. And, you know, maybe it will mean something special to someone else. And, you know, in terms of the pressures from the outside world, my husband and I always joke now, but at the time it was quite, you know, we weren't seeing eye to eye. And he was like, all you do is read the Bible and sit there with that notepad. Like, what are you even doing? And it's like, it's wasting so much time. You could be doing so much more with your life. But I was like, no, I just kept saying like, well, I'm still like earning the money that I need to earn. And if this is what I want to do with my spare time, like this is what I have to do right now. Something is compelling me. Like that was, you know, when we take the language of this book, that was my inclination at the time. It was like, I have to sit here with this and marinate in this and do my yoga and read my Bible and do all the things that back in those days my pastor was telling me to do, because that's what I was inclined to, and that was my truth, you know, then, that took me here. But I had people telling me, I had voices in my head telling me to stop, and I had people in the world who were very close to me that I agreed to spend my life with also telling me to stop. And you know, now we can look back and think, oh, that was hilarious, but you know, at the time it's not so easy. So I just want to, you know, give encouragement and support to anyone who is having ideas that or they're, you know, on the cusp of being ready to share or leap into that new vocation that you're being called into or that you're inclined to do. Like, follow yourself, follow that inner tuition, that guide. Yeah, follow it like with reckless abandon, because it might seem really odd at the time, but it does, in my experience, it does bring you to that place of blossom and fruition and bliss. So there we go.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Definitely go for it. Go. I'm telling you, go. Kelly's telling you, go. Go for it.
So is there anything else you want to add before we sign this off?
Thank you. If you've tuned in this long, to whoever's watching, listening, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm happy to be a part of this. I'm going to continue to do it. We're going to keep elevating and growing, and definitely I'm here on this journey to travel with you guys, and I love it. So I just want to say that.
Thank you. All, every single one of you. You are all a perfect individual, one of a kind. And it's a pleasure to be in this journey of life with you all. So as always, links to resources, books, etc. are in the description box below. And yeah, wishing you all the peace and light and well in the world on your journeys. Namaste.